I've started recording now.
Great. All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sean McMannon, Superintendent of the Winooski School District, and pleased to have Jessie Baker, our City Manager, Rick Hebert, our Chief of Police, and Jason Ziter, our School Resource Officer, with me tonight. Before I put the slides up and share screen, I just wanted to welcome everybody and thank you for being here, especially during the holiday season. And I hope that everybody is getting some relaxation and some fun with their families and some downtime to kind of refuel during these challenging times, and that everybody is continuing to follow those important precautions and stay really safe during the break. So a little bit of an overview of process, and I am going to share screen now so that you can follow along with the slides. All right. Okay. So an overview of the process. So the board has asked for public input around school safety and security so that they can make an important decision specifically with regards to their memorandum of understanding with the city. And also, as we are under a significant capital project and we'll be moving into a new building in the fall of 2022, you know, it is a good time for us to kind of reflect on the safety and security strategies that we use in the district and think about them moving forward as we move into a beautiful new space. So last Tuesday and tonight were meant as the educational component of this process, where we're really, myself and then the city personnel are really going to talk about what the current state of school safety and security is, and that partnership and how we work together to do our very best to ensure that all are safe and secure, not only in the school, but across the city. And then in January, we'll have a couple of more town halls, and that's going to be more of the voice, the discussion, the debate, the position taking on various things. And that will happen later. This is really the educational part tonight, where we'll just be kind of telling you what's in place right now. And we've already started the process somewhat with a questionnaire that has gone out. As of tonight, we have about 48 responses. This questionnaire has gone out in our weekly family communications to all of our school district families. It's gone out to all of our school district staff. It has gone out over social media channels and Front Porch Forum. So we're hoping to get a more robust participation in that questionnaire about school safety and security to incorporate into the community inputs for board decision-making moving forward. And then the other piece is that right now in the FY22 budget, the school board is retaining the funds that we allot to the city for the services of the resource officer, and we'll be evaluating that MOU by late January to see if they will specifically request those services from the city for next school year or not, or for an alternative purpose. So one piece of process for tonight is that we've set this up as a webinar. So we would ask you to use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. You can add your questions in there at any time. And we will have the first 30 to 40 minutes will be presentation. And then we'll have the rest of the time for Q&A. And we will go to those questions and answer them in the order that they have been written in. And we do have Emily Hecker, our Director of Communications and Development, who's our moderator tonight, and will help us with all of that to keep us on track. Okay. So in a lot of the communication, including the questionnaire that's gone out to the community, we've tried to create a shared understanding of what safety and security mean to us. They're a little bit different, and that safety is the condition. It's the way people feel physically, emotionally in a school, particularly intellectually safe to take risks in their learning. And then security is really the procedures followed. They're the drills, the practice, all of those things that we have in place in case of emergency. Things like our public safety committee, developing all of those procedures for different types of emergency events, video surveillance cameras, and so forth. And we like to think about safety as a really broad term. There's a lot of prevention and proactive things that go into ensuring a safe learning environment in the district, across the district. And at the top of that list is really fostering positive relationships. When people feel connected to each other, when they feel like they're learning, they feel like they have students have adults that care about them and know them well. When parents feel like the school is supporting their children and supporting them, then we tend to have a very safe community. So specifically, there are programmatic things that we do, like at the elementary, responsive classroom, where we build community those first 6 weeks in those classrooms. And then PBIS, positive behavioral interventions and supports, which is school-wide work that's done to ensure that students are adhering to the school-wide expectations and that they feel good about that and that they're contributing to the overall safety and health of the broader community. A really great program that we have at the middle high school is called Advisory. So we have small groups of students with teachers, and they have the theory behind this is having at least one adult in your learning community that you know really well and that they know you well, not just as a student, but also as a person, so that they can celebrate all the accomplishments along the way with you, and they can help you when things get difficult. Then we also have very specific groups of people and events that we do to foster those positive relationships. It starts with the hiring process. We put a lot of emphasis when we hire people in selecting people that we believe have the background, the skills, and the personality traits, interpersonal skills to foster positive relationships with students, staff, and families. And then we have specific folks like our guidance counselors, social workers, our behavior coaches and interventionists. And then we also have events like bringing the community together for the barbecue, which we hope to bring back next August. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that due to COVID this year. Having our parent-teacher conferences a couple times a year. Different events that we try to build community, which fosters a sense of safety as well. Another is bringing valuable resources to our students and staff and families. In particular, a big part of this is after school and summer programs, some of which we certainly partner with the city around those things, and including the Thrive program after school and some of the after school and summer programs that gets done with city personnel. We also partner with the Burlington School District, but these are all ways, these are developmental asset building activities for our students that make them feel safe in the community, that make them feel connected and proud. Co-curriculars like sports, which we also hope to get back to here and have a basketball season sometime in January once we get through this latest situation. And then we're fortunate in that we are able to garner resources from generous donors and other agencies to fill in some of the basic needs for some of our families who have those needs, so that they can hopefully focus on other things besides trying to figure out how to feed their families and pay their rent and so forth. And then, of course, as a school, the academic supports that we provide, particularly around literacy, math, and behavioral strategies. So in terms of security, we have a real team approach to safety and security across the district. We have a district-wide leadership team. We have building-based leadership teams. At the elementary, we have grade-level teacher teams. At the middle school, we have teams. And right now, in the middle of high school, right now, we're calling them pods. So we have teams of teachers around groups of students, which all fosters a sense of safety and security. And it's always at the top of our list when we're considering any kind of programmatic changes, any kind of new initiatives, that is it going to maintain or grow safety and security within the district. Also, statutorily, we are required to have what's called a public safety committee. And they're the ones who are responsible for ensuring that we have an up-to-date emergency response plan for all different types of situations that may arise. They are quite busy in updating that document and also in preparation for changes in the facility during the capital project. Some of the other pieces that we have, school security, we are a locked facility. So all of our external doors are locked, and we have a single entryway through the front of the building with a receptionist there. We run our drills. We're required by law to run a certain number of drills, and then of course we have our full-time school resource officer. So a little bit of history on the school resource officer in Winooski. The school resource officer program has been around for over 20 years. There's been several different SROs. In my 8 years here, we've been fortunate in that I feel the partnership between the city and the school has really deepened and become much stronger. And one of the ways that that's happened is Chief Hebert invited me in when they were going to hire a new officer. They were particularly looking for someone who could serve in the role of SRO. And so I was able to be a part of that interview process and give input on that. And so a few years back, we were able to hire Dave Solomon, who had background as a teacher and also was an experienced SRO in another community. And then since then, we have transitioned to Jason Ziter, our current school resource officer, he'll talk a little bit about his training and background, but has done a fantastic job here. So we've made a real effort to hire people that fit into the climate and the culture of our school, who have the experiences, the cultural sensitivities, the awareness of being in a school and what their role is, to find people who fit that mold. And we've been very, very successful, I'd say, with both Dave and Jason. Also, what we've adopted is the NASRO triad. So I feel like when I first got here, there was not necessarily a clear framework for how an SRO was going to work within the school district. And so we shifted that, and Jason has gotten training in the NASRO framework. And as you can see, there's those 3 specific areas that he acts as a teacher, a counselor, and a law enforcement officer. And he will talk a little bit more about that later. But I think that we have evolved quite a bit. We've acted a lot more intentionally over time with the role of the school resource officer. Not that it is perfect by any stretch. There's always work to be done by all of us, but I feel like we've made a lot of growth, and some of our data shows certainly that we have made some growth through that model. So I'm going to hand it over to City Manager Jessie Baker now.
Great. Thank you, Sean, and thank you all for being with us this evening. So we wanted, on the city side, we wanted to start this conversation at the community safety level, and I'm just going to speak for a minute or two and then hand it over to our public safety experts. We are partners with the school, and thank you, Sean, very much for the invitation to be here tonight in providing a safe community, so safety community-wide, not just in one building or one facility in the city. To that end, in 2015, so several years ago, the city adopted the strategic vision that you see on the slide in front of you. And one of the 4 priority areas they very intentionally included was wanting to be a safe, healthy, and connected community where people felt connected to one another, that a government that fostered relationships across generations and cultures. Fostering those connections and those relationships is not only how we aim to be as safe as community as possible, but also connects the government, your city leaders to the community. And it lets us learn from the community as well about how to improve how we provide services. So you see here, there's not a strategic vision about having the best police department or the best fire department. The real goal of city operations is to provide those opportunities for people to connect and feel safe in a healthy way. Sean, can you go to the next slide, please? So I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about how we've operationalized that over the last 5 years. So in 2018 and 19, we adopted a new citywide strategic or a citywide master plan. This is our formative document that outlines all of our priorities for the next 8 years on the city side. That master plan is aligned to those strategic vision areas you just saw on the last slide, including safe, healthy, connected people. We then aligned our commission structure to those areas. So we have residents serving in volunteer capacities guiding our policy setting work around those action items. Every year we set a shared work plan with the council about how we're going to implement that shared strategic vision and what we're doing to provide a safe, healthy, connected community. And that's the council and the public's opportunity to come in and help us think about how we're delivering those services. We've also focused on equity and inclusion and ensuring that, or making progress to, we have a long way to go, but making progress to how we provide equitable municipal services to all and ensure that all voices in our community have the ability to be at decision-making tables. And I'm excited to go into the next phase of this conversation where we can hear from some more of those voices. I want to focus on a couple other things that we've done to provide a safe community. We've embedded in 2018, we embedded mental health professionals employed by the Howard Center in our police department, ensuring that when we were responding to crisis calls, we were responding with appropriate level of services and connections to resources. And then we have hired a youth interventionist to work not in our police department, but in our community services department to ensure that there's connection between children and families in the community and the services that we can best provide them. So I'm going to stop there and pass it over to Chief Hebert to talk about the police department specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie, and hello, everybody. Thanks for giving us your time this evening to hear our presentation. I'm not going to take too long. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and just discuss. I took over as interim chief in 2014 and was made the permanent chief in 2015. That timeline overlapped when President Obama created a task force on 21st century policing that was strictly built to strengthen community policing and trust between police departments and the communities that they serve. Out of that study, these 6 pillars that are listed on the slide were created and given as a blueprint for police departments to proceed and make better working partners with their communities. So our leadership team used that 21st century task force report recommendations, and we invested immediately in a training curriculum that embraced community policing, unconscious bias, cultural diversity, and officer development, and it's still ongoing today. We utilized a collaborative process to develop a community policing strategic plan, and that included input from AALV, school, also community services and police officers within the police department. And that plan was based on those pillars, but also we tied it into the city's master plan as well. So to try and highlight both the 21st century policing plan along with the master plan and come up with our own strategic plan, which is a blueprint for our daily work. If I could get the next slide, please. As of today, the job continues. Our job descriptions were updated to include a focus on community policing, decision-making, the guardian caretaker mentality, problem solving, providing resources, and valuing the sanctity of all human life as essential job performance expectations. And we continue to focus all of our, I would say probably 95% of our training budget on the things that are listed on the slide. Not every officer's been to every training, but somebody has been to everything that's listed on the slide there. And you can see there's a pretty strong focus on caretaking within the community and making us better partners within the community. I'm very proud of that over the 5 years. Go on to the next slide. And I'm going to hand it off to Jason, the school resource officer for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Sean and Jesse. And I want to say it's an honor to be able to speak here tonight. I consider my role not only as a police officer here for the city of Winooski, but as the SRO, a privilege and an honor. Winooski School District is a great place to work and is a fantastic community. I have learned a lot of who I am and how to better myself as a community member by this job and to help this community and become a safer place. Sean talked about the NASRO model. NASRO is the National Association of School Resource Officers. They're the educator nationally and actually internationally for school resource officers. And they offer several classes. The first is the NASRO, the SRO basic course, which is a 40-hour program. Within that, they talk about in their curriculum, effective classroom management, understanding children with special needs, de-escalation techniques, so on and so forth. But the biggest thing that they focus on is something called the Nashville Triangle. And that NASRO triangle of what the SRO is supposed to do is that counselor, mentor, teacher, educator, and then law enforcement officer. And those all collaborate together and provide an important role in what the SRO does. Many times I have sat in with our guidance counselors or had a student come to me of which I was able to then bring them to a guidance counselor. Being a mentor, right now I have the privilege of working with a senior in her capstone project, in her communication capstone project, who has an interest in law enforcement and criminal justice, and was able to connect her with a deputy U.S. Marshal, and the two of them had a Zoom meeting where the deputy U.S. Marshal was able to explain to her and the student all of her job roles and what she does, and was a great opportunity for that. As a teacher and educator, I'm used quite a bit. A couple of years ago, I went to the DARE training to become a DARE instructor, and we have begun the DARE education program in 5th grade in JFK. I've also used that in the 9th grade health class. And that is a great program. And DARE is very different from what it was back in the late 80s, early 90s. It was totally redone. So I get that opportunity to teach students in the guidance portion of their 5th grade class. Part of it is about drug and alcohol, but the other things that are focused on are bullying and effective communications. One of the things that we also did was we, through the training that I received at the school, I saw how vital it was getting the information on being trauma informed, and saw the need for that for other police officers, other school resource officers around the state. So we sponsored, the Winooski Police Department sponsored Dave Melnick to come in and do a session that we paid for so that everybody could attend for free. As Sean mentioned, I'm the co-chair of the safety committee of what we call our crisis response team. I led the Mindful Mentor program. I teach in driver's ed. One of the things that we're looking forward to do is the CPR program in the PE class. You know, I teach the staff CPR. stop the bleed, and some other the dangers of vaping. One of the other important things that the role as SRO does is allows me to be an ambassador, again, like Jessie talked about in our whole community approach, community safety, with the aspect of being available after hours, being available to the city and to the police officers, and bringing them, you know, if we respond to a domestic violence incident at night, the officers let me know about that if there were children involved, that way I can then get the guidance counselors to wrap around the children who've been involved in that and support them in any way they can, or significant medical emergencies or other trauma that could have happened to the families. The other thing is being able to utilize and know the cultures of our community, and being able to utilize the leadership in those cultures and those communities to help us, not only as a police department, but that bond between the school, the police department, and those community leaders to help bring resolution to incidents that may have happened, or help the students guide them in positive decision making. And then these are just some pictures of some of the stuff that we've done. We had a very successful summer camp program 2 years ago. We were scheduled to do it this past year, but couldn't because of COVID. I still have students walking up to me asking me, when's the next public safety camp? I want to do it. And we had a great turnout for that. Providing the police department bought helmets for the children. We gave the helmets away for free, reading in the classes. I'm also on the fire department in my hometown. So during Fire Prevention Week, brought in my fire gear and had one of the teachers dress up so the children could get experience in that. And then through our community events that we have, our community barbecue, just the wrapping, again, that whole community of what we do.
Thanks, Jason. I just wanted to touch on 3 quick things before we get to the question and answer. I like to take these opportunities just to remind people of our philosophy and particularly my thought process about the police department is funded by and belongs to our residents. We'll always strive to be caretakers of our entire community that our residents both expect and deserve. I think we know anybody who's been around the school district over the past really since Sean's arrived on scene, I can speak of personally that they've made tremendous strides in supporting students in a variety of ways. And we really just want to continue to be part of that ongoing work. And I'd like to reassure people that regardless of the outcome of this process, we'll still continue to find innovative ways to partner with the school district and to promote safety and security within the school and our city for everyone who lives and visits in Winooski. I think it's just really important to share with people, you know, that is how everybody feels, from the chief right on down to our newest officer, that we want to be good partners, and we want to continue that work. I think, you know, a way that we could make this better going forward is to sit down and possibly have meetings with the student association that brought the demands to the school board and try and become good working partners with them and hear their concerns. We're willing to sit down and talk with anybody at any time that wants to bring concerns to us, because it makes us better police officers and in turn makes us better guardians for our community. We always embrace community policing and positive and alternative outcomes. Beginning in FY20, we transferred money specifically from the police department to the community services department with the idea of implementing the youth interventionist position to support at-risk youth and their families. We also continue to support restorative justice, mediation, counseling. As Jessie mentioned, we have an embedded community outreach team as a means to support our community that result in positive, forward-thinking policing outcomes. So really what I'm trying to say is, you know, we're not stuck in the 90s where, you know, we're looking to make arrests, issue citations, traffic tickets. We want to support people. We want to understand why negative behaviors or negative outcomes, you know, for students at schools, and try and be part of that solution. So we're always willing to, you know, 20 years ago, restorative justice was a step 1, and maybe now it's a step 3 between counseling, mediation, and the youth interventionist. And we're totally fine with that. We just want to be good partners. The last is mutual aid. And I just want to discuss that a little bit tonight. If we don't have an officer assigned specifically at the school, there is a chance that there will be a day where an area agency is asked to respond to an incident because we don't have an officer available. This interaction will be handled based on their department culture and how the responding agency is trained, and not necessarily using our approaches, our department culture, and the de-escalation that WPD has adopted on a daily basis within every officer within the police department. I'm not saying the first time we did this presentation, I think someone misinterpreted my intent. You will always have police response regardless of whether there's an SRO stationed at the school or there isn't. I want to make that really clear. What I'm saying is that with a school resource officer at the school, there is zero response time. So they're already on scene when the incident happens. And they're more than likely known to the people that are involved in the incident, which is highly helpful for us for making for a positive outcome. I have all the faith in the world of our policing professionals that surround us, that they would do a fine job responding if we're not able to. It just always makes me feel better when your tax dollars are at work and that you get to reap the benefits of that by having the Winooski police respond to a Winooski incident. But I do want to reassure everyone that when a police response is needed, especially if it's a high profile incident, you'll have more police officers than we probably need within a few minutes. So those are really only the three things that I wanted to make points of before we get to the question and answer. So thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, Jason, and Rick. Appreciate that. And let me see. I'm gonna stop sharing here, and we'll go. Emily, you ready to go to the Q&A?
I am. Yeah. So there's one question that should be pretty quick to answer, and then a fairly lengthy comment. So I'll start with the question. It's asking, how is the SRO funded?
Do you want me to
Well,
jump into that?
Yeah, so there's an agreement, there's a memorandum of understanding between the city and the school district. And we pay the city, I think it's about $55,000 to provide the SRO services to the school.
And so just to add a few more sentences on that, on the city side. So the school resource officer is the 16th sworn officer in the Winooski Police Department. So as a city employee, part of the police union, it costs about $105,000 a year to provide that, to have that position in the city. So as Sean said, per the current memorandum of understanding between the city and the school provides $55,000 of that funding. The rest comes from the general fund of the city, which is funded by property taxpayers, by our neighbors. So the additional piece of that is that Officer Ziter, the SRO, is at school for every day that there is school and he is needed on campus. Otherwise, he again makes up that 16th sworn officer and provides general police coverage throughout the city. Often in the summer months, that is dedicated to areas where, you know, folks are spending time outside of school. So building those relationships at the library or at the new pool or in our parks and open spaces, and really maintaining those relationships and those connections throughout the summer months.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks, Sean. So we have two additional questions, but you did kind of frame at the beginning, Sean, that we'd answer in order that they're asked. So I will start. This is a comment from Liz Edsel, who is our newly appointed board member. With all due respect to the city and school staff who pulled this together, who I know are stretched to the limits due to COVID and much more, I do not think that this presentation is fully educational as framed at the beginning and envisioned by the board. While this outlines how current structure work from administration, city, and police department perspectives, you do not make space for the WSA critiques, offer any space for the restorative justice work that I believe the district has a grant for, or note that evaluating whether an armed police officer in schools increases safety And then she goes on to say, if I were a member of the community coming to this presentation without having followed the conversation about the WSA's demands, I would have no idea from this presentation that there is any critique of the current system. She says she's honored to be an interim appointee to the school board, and that this conversation has been added to the January 6th board agenda to talk more about the outreach and education and how to include more voices. So I don't hear any kind of distinct question there, but if any of you would like to make a comment or clarifying statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've done our very best to publicize these, and in the publicizing of these events, the demands were linked into all of that publicity, whether it was Front Porch Forum or all the communications we did with our staff and with our families. We've done that repeatedly. So as advertised, this was to kind of give the current state. The piece about WSA's demands was communicated in the lead up to all of these, and I know will certainly become a part of the more discussion-based forums that we'll be having next month.
Thank you. So there's another question here from Matt Guile. He's asking, what are the actions that can be taken by an armed law enforcement officer that could not be done by a Winooski School District employee?
I'll take that one. Thanks for the question, Matt. There's situations where maybe an irate parent comes to the school where they're, being physically aggressive with school staff, that they're not feeling safe. There's times I think, I don't want to speak. I think Jason might have a little bit more day-to-day, storytelling for me here, but I would have to think that, when you're dealing with trauma-informed students, maybe sometimes somebody acts out aggressively, physically threatening, staff or themselves. And I don't know where that line is. I'm not a school counselor or a trauma therapist, so I don't know where their comfort level is, when things start to get physical. But I can tell you nationally that that's usually the point where the police do get involved for a variety of reasons, whether it's to protect somebody from themselves, or if it rises to a level where we have to put somebody in protective custody or restrain or arrest that person, which is very few and far between, but that's where a police officer would be more effective than a school district employee. And I think I'd also like just to touch on, I don't like focusing on bad things that happen in the world. That's not my personality. But one of, I think her name was Liz, one of Liz's questions, I think it touched on what type of thing, makes the school safer with an armed police officer. I would have to tell you that it's the day we hope never comes. But if there was ever a very dynamic situation where the school went into lockdown and somebody was there to create harm, I think we would all feel very much better having a police officer there and ready to respond. And again, this isn't fear mongering in any way. As the content expert and your chief of police, sometimes I do have to bring up the dark side of our job, which is, life and death situations. 99.99999% of the time, it's nothing but something that's creating a backache for Jason over the years of wearing it. But the 0.11% of the time where he needs to defend people and keep people safe when they've gone into lockdown, and I think they'd be very happy to have him in the building.
Thank you. The next question is it fair to say that having an SRO in the schools provides a complete full circle and wrap around each student?
Well, I'll start, and then maybe Jason, you can talk a little more. I think that it is available that he could be a part of that circle and wrap. What we find is that he ends up being a part of that wraparound service team for students that and families that are involved with typically with multiple issues going on, multiple agencies. And then it also depends on what his role has been with that student or family. Often, you know, if he's in the role of mentor with them, he has a relationship, a caring, safe relationship with a student where they may tell him things that they don't feel comfortable telling someone else. I've also been involved in some situations where he's been able to give the law perspective about certain behaviors or actions that a student or a parent may be considering. So I think it's available, but he isn't wrapping around all the students all the time, except for being, you know, the friendly face and greeter out front in the morning and, you know, throughout the building during the day. But he does tend to focus on groups of students and families that really require a kind of a multidisciplinary team to help support them.
Thanks, Sean. Quite frequently, I'm involved in Act 264 meetings with families, support services that are offered to students because of the involvement that the police department has outside of the school. And so that's a way that I can assist that being done to help make sure that there's safety and security at home and in the community as well at school. There have been times where we've had a student expressing some dangerous behaviors and concerning behaviors at school that we've talked about with the support services within the school, but then I've also been able to communicate that with our police department and then share, whether in person or in an email, that if the police department does have to respond to that house, how to approach that student, how to deal with that student, how to talk with that student, and what the parents may know, and how to assist the parents. So like Sean says, am I able to wrap around every student? No. But do I go from JFK to the high school every day and try and make as many contacts as I can and, you know, air high fives or, you know, connect with students or do push-up challenges in PE class with other students? You know, there's multiple different things, but, you know, when the time arises, yes, you know, whatever way that we can help support, the better.
Thanks, Jason. So I think this question connects to that as well. It says, what are the metrics that we are using to evaluate the effectiveness of the SRO?
Yeah, I can start again, and then you guys can jump in too. So the police have a data system that they collect, and basically what I have worked with, because I've supervised Dave Solomon and Jason, you know, from the school perspective. Rick is their direct supervisor, and then we collaborate around that supervision. And so we use their system, and basically we have him kind of track his time and use some descriptors about how he's spending his time. So is he spending his time in an educational perspective? You know, like doing DARE programs, like in driver's ed, for instance. Is he responding to a student incident? Is he responding to an adult parent type of an incident? Did he leave campus to respond to a community incident? Is he taking part in meetings, student-related meetings, multi-agency, those kinds of things? And what we've seen over the past 6 years or so is we've seen a massive decrease in having to respond to student behaviors. Now, that is not just because of an SRO or because Dave and Jason. That is because we've instituted all kinds of programming, and I think the people that we have hired, we've created a climate and a culture where I think kids are getting what they need more frequently with the supports, whether it's ELL, special ed, literacy, math, behavior supports throughout the day. and the skills of our staff to work with students when they're having a difficult time, all of that has improved. And so he's able then to focus more on educational time and being a part of some of those multidisciplinary teams to work on some of our more challenging cases that we have. And so that's ultimately where we wanted to be all along, was not having him go to classrooms to address students who were having hard times regulating, but being the person who is providing those 3 parts of the triad, and most importantly, that educator piece, because we have so many different inputs that he can be an important part of, and including this year, he's always been a member of the Public Safety Committee, but now as a co-chair, I'm asking him, along with Jean Berthium, one of our middle high school co-principals, to really take leadership for that group at a challenging time in the middle of the capital project. So that certainly will also be kind of a metric of evaluation of the effectiveness of the SRO moving forward. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
Thanks, Sean. And there's just a comment that's related. It says the data that you're describing is presented by Dave Solomon last summer and can be found in the SRO literature review linked in the WSD webpage. And for anyone watching this video, it will be on a YouTube link, and I will include that link to the website as well, so that anyone who's interested can look into that there. So let's see. It says, the next question says, on the SRO page on the Winooski School District website, it says one of the duties of the SRO is to facilitate discussions about police, race, injustice, and systemic change. Can you talk more about how this is done?
I'll just use a few examples and I'll let Jason speak on this, but I know there's been a few times when the Black Lives Matter flag was raised at the school. Jason, I believe, went and did a question and answer with a group of students there. Another example would be when George Floyd was murdered. We had the privilege of having 2 Zoom meetings with 2 separate groups of students. It was really heartbreaking to listen to how afraid and how that affected them, and to get their perspective, which is always a learning experience for us, and I think makes us better human beings, better police officers. So that's just the 2 examples that I wanted to talk about. And like I said earlier, we're always more than willing to sit down with any group at any time and talk and have these tough, conversations. I think it makes all of us better.
I think also the implicit bias training that we have, that's not only mandated by the Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council, but also the work that we do here within the city, and also the work that's done through the school district. Being an active participant within the school district offers that as well. There was a comment back a little while ago. Last year, we had a tense basketball game, one of our varsity basketball games, where there was some racial comments being done. And I went on the away game on my own to support our varsity boys at this same school that they had, to make sure that our boys and families were going to be treated fairly and safely at the game.
Yeah, I guess I would add a piece that I don't think that we have been intentional about saying Jason is facilitating discussions about race, injustice, and systemic change. Okay, that has not been a part of his role yet. Could it? It could. What it has been, I think, in the evolution of the position and the partnership is that he has, from a community policing perspective, one of the first steps is building trust and relationship, and that takes time. And so I think that we have done that. And so now we're starting to move into the more substantial work. And I think that whoever wrote the question listed it, perfectly. And we've kind of scratched the surface in our system and citywide effort towards anti-racism is going to push more of those discussions, and we need to get more intentional and more organized about how we have those important discussions about race, injustice, and systemic change.
If I can just jump in for a moment. I think it's also one of the values that I've seen Officer Ziter bring to public safety citywide is the relationships he's built in the community and the culturally appropriate knowledge that he can bring back to the rest of our police department. We are not an all-white police department, but a mostly white police department, a mostly white leadership team. We have a lot of our own work to do and a lot of work to do to break down systematic racism within our organization. And Officer Ziter, because of what he has learned through his relationships, is able to bring some of that knowledge back to the individual officers in the police department as well as citywide staff. It's not enough. There is certainly more that we can all do, but I think it is a way that we are making small changes in our quest to do better by all of our residents in the city.
Thank you. So the next question is, can we please talk about how this entire meeting is from a white perspective? And I think that kind of relates to what you were all talking about in the previous question. Why haven't you included the perspective from the BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color community? You talk about inclusion, but don't act on it.
The intent of these two webinars, as stated, was just to educate and give the current state. We're waiting for the next step to engage in all those different perspectives, where these sessions will be discussion based and people will have an opportunity to ask live questions and debate and state their positions about all different aspects of safety and security, including the SRO. But that was not the stated intent. So that's why we did not include others. We were just trying to get a baseline of education about where we are right now.
Thanks, Sean. There's a comment here from Coach Jay, and I believe Jason kind of touched on this, but Coach Jay says, please don't forget, Jason Z went above and beyond and attended a boys varsity game as we were nervous about racial comments and safety in Twinfield, Vermont. This was after hours. And then Coach Jay asks, what are the metrics to say having no SRO works in schools? And I think that might have been in response to one of the questions about the effectiveness, but I don't know if anyone has something to respond here.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know of any metrics that talk about not having an SRO works. I don't know how you necessarily measure that. It could be out there. I'm just not aware of it.
Anyone else want to jump in here? No? Okay. It says, what are the dates, times of the next scheduled forums, and who will be permitted to present? Will our community be able to hear more about the RJ, its Restorative Justice Program, and the WSA, the Winooski Students for Anti-Racism? These aspects are certainly part of the current state.
Yeah, so I would say, number one, January 6th, Wednesday, January 6th, as board member Liz Edsel stated in one of her comments, It is on the agenda for a 30-minute discussion. So that'll be up to the board if they want to make any kinds of changes or to the forums or the process moving forward. We do not have the dates in January yet. We're also scheduling some similar forums with our EL families. And so we're trying to get those on the calendar first. And we're doing those by specific language communities so that we can kind of do both the education and the voice in the same session. And then we'll certainly publicize these next set depending on what happens at the January 6th board meeting. And like I said, those are going to be opportunities to talk about all the things: restorative justice, WSA's demand about the SRO, all the other demands that certainly have implications for school safety and security and citywide as well. So that is the intent, is to really open up the space for all of those different questions, discussions during that time, so that ultimately the board can hear from a variety of viewpoints and make an informed decision.
Sean, can I make a comment about the restorative justice? And I know that there's a grant. I've been in contact with Kayla about some recent incidents to get her input and her direction and some support from her. And again, restorative justice isn't new for the Winooski Police Department. It's the avenue that it's taking within the school district, and that development there is new. And my conversations with Kayla is that takes time. It just can't be an instant implementation. That process takes time to develop throughout the school. You know, I've already, since we've hired our new youth interventionalist, reached out to him for an assistance with a case. Like Chief Hebert said, restorative justice now may be our third, tier in response to something that we're dealing with. If we can interact and help support a student that's had, a negative incident, again, like Chief Hebert said, how can we wrap around and how can we support that student? How can we figure out what's best going to support that? And so we are, and I do utilize those services that are there.
Thanks, Jason. So here's just a comment and then a couple of other data related questions. One is the comment is: the data that can't be tracked is the amount of connections and positive relationships that he has developed over the years. And then the data question is: could we potentially compare ourselves to schools that do not have an SRO versus those that do have an SRO? And then a related question, there are metrics and research that show that having no SROs in schools works too. It's a different model and evidence-based. It's just not part of this presentation tonight. So that's more of a comment, but I suppose that the question would be, if there's any kind of comparison between schools that do and do not have an SRO. I don't know if any of you have knowledge about those kinds of studies, but I'll open it up in case you do.
I'm definitely aware of the publications that are out there. I think I may have even, I think I forwarded some information to Sean very, very early on in this process of, it wasn't about schools without SROs, but it was about communities that are basically come up with ways to be more interactive with what the SRO is and what the program does. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, look, everybody has opinions. Everybody shares evidence for different points of view. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the school district is better having a school resource officer. What I'm telling you is I think the city of Winooski is better having a school resource officer because your students have the ability to form a relationship, ask questions, see a police officer on a daily basis, and therefore I would have to think that's going to have some positive effect after hours if they have that interaction with a different police officer. And I think it makes our community stronger as a whole. I think Winooski is, the student association brought up a lot. I read their concerns. I've watched every Zoom meeting where they presented. The one thing that I've noticed has been repetitive is that their concerns are with national issues. And I haven't seen anything specific to the Winooski program that's been brought forward other than him being armed and an unmarked or marked vehicle. But we're here to listen. We're here to have those conversations. I don't think running away, I shouldn't say run away, it's probably a poor choice of words, but I don't think us being removed builds relationships. I think it just creates a further divide, and it's that mystery of the police and marginalized communities exists. If we spend time together, we have conversations, it has to make us better on both sides of that table. And that's just my opinion.
Thank you. And also, I think it might be worth mentioning that we can always add some of these resources and research to the webpage that we have talking about these forums and the process that we're currently in the midst of. So if you have some information, I'm happy to add that, include that. And that goes to everyone here. We can definitely make more robust resources available. So the next question is, can the dialogue on the SRO be focused on or limited to the role and the structure and not the individual qualities of the person filling the role? I don't know if that necessarily, if anyone has a response, but I think that's noted. Here.
I'll jump in, Emily. I think
okay.
that is a hard thing to do. And I remember kind of talking about this at some of the earlier board meetings when this topic was being discussed, and there was a lot of people who would kind of begin their comments by saying, I love Jason, but this isn't about Jason. And or I think Dave Solomon did a great job, but it's not about Dave, it's about the role. And that is true. And we worked really hard to get the right person into this role, in partnering together to find the right people in these roles. And just like any position, the person, their skills, their personality traits, all play a part in the effectiveness of the role. So I think it's different for different people and how skilled they can be at separating those things in considering this. And it ultimately is, I think most people, we know this is not about Jason. This is about the community giving input to the board on the role.
Thanks, Sean. Here I have a comment from Eliza Willis. They say, if this was about where we are right now, it would include the BIPOC experiences that make BIPOC people feel unsafe. You aren't including them like you say you are. And again, BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, and people of color, for people who aren't familiar with that term.
I guess I would just say that, after the murder of George Floyd, we were approached by the school to address those concerns with students that wanted to partake. And that was a listening session from us. We said very little for the better part of an hour and a half for 2 days. And we're always willing to do that. I think, this particular year with COVID and remote learning and Zoom meetings, it makes it a little bit harder to have those, those conversations. But the opportunity is always there. We're always willing. Maybe that's, I'm hearing we should do a better job of maybe starting those conversations and not waiting to be asked. So that's my takeaway for tonight, is that we're going to offer those.
I'll interject too. I know one of the things that I got to participate in was a meeting that the school department had with our Somali community and policing there. Through that and through our Somali liaison, I've gotten to learn leaders of the community and responding to when I've been outside of school on school vacations, acting in my role as patrol officer. I've been able to utilize the things that I've learned through being at the school with our liaisons in how to integrate the leadership from our other communities. And also dealing with our Congolese population there, taking it upon myself to try and learn Swahili. And when we had a lost child this summer, being able to communicate and just saying hi and just asking someone how they were and being able to communicate with them and knowing the right people of who to call to help facilitate these processes is very helpful. Knowing the communities and their religions and being respectful of that. I think that is something that we take pride in. I think Jessie mentioned that earlier. But that is something that I try and make myself aware of, that the SRO should make themselves aware of, to be able to include all those people, in decisions and helping their communities, knowing that the police department could only help this family to a certain extent, but knowing that their community could help them much more than we could was something I was able to bring into play with that incident and bringing their leadership in to help that family in that situation.
Thanks. Thank you, Jason. I think maybe it would be worth, I might have phrased it kind of incorrectly, but I think Eliza, if you're still here, I think the question was more about this presentation rather than in the role of the police officer in the schools. So the BIPOC experiences that make them feel unsafe. And I think that Sean mentioned that would be a more robust conversation happening with more voices later in a date to be determined, but that is part of this process and this plan. So
right, I think also where we're getting some feedback around that is through the questionnaire. There's questions about what make you feel safe and secure and what makes you feel unsafe and insecure at school. And so, what I'm seeing just in the results that we have so far is it's a very mixed bag. There are people who say that they having an SRO and an armed SRO in the building makes them feel unsafe. And there are people who are saying an armed SRO in the building makes me feel safer. So that's why this process is really important. And when we get to those more open-ended sessions where we can really talk about those things, is going to be really important.
Yeah. Thank you. So the next question is there data that the Winooski School District used to determine the need for an armed school resource officer?
So as I said in the presentation, there's been an SRO in the school district for over 20 years. I do not know the history on if there was a data driven approach to that in the very beginning or not. What I know from my own experience that when I got here, I did not, and I have not heard until this past summer, anyone ever tell me that they thought that we shouldn't have an SRO or that they felt unsafe because of the SRO being in the building. But what I tried to do was bring framework and intentionality to the position by working with Chief Hebert so that we could partner on community policing and try to foster those relationships. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. But I don't know of any data from the very, very beginning. And as mentioned, the data that we've collected along the way is the only data that I have locally.
I can tell you, I've been here since 1996, and the SRO position started in 1998, the school year of 98, I believe. Jim Fuller was the first SRO. And it was a collaborative grant through the Department of Education and the city. The city, or I should say the school district, city, and the police department were all listed on the grant as partners. And the thought process for the SRO at the time was it was a new program in community policing to connect youth, within your district and police officers, and it was an outreach, a way to strengthen those relationships. So that's kind of the history of where it started.
Thank you. So next question here, why would we eliminate an SRO before we make necessary changes and practical changes to the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, which is between the city and the school? Can we just sit down at the table to discuss changes instead of removing the SRO?
It's a great question. I think that's why we're having this process. I also believe that because of the public pressure and the push for action, that processes are being put under a lot of pressure to happen more quickly, which is creating less thoughtful, less necessarily inclusive processes along the way to get to thoughtful decisions. I think we all probably wish that we weren't in a pandemic, that for some of us, we weren't in the middle of budget season, and that we had 8 to 12 months to plan a process that is broader and more thoughtful, more accessible, to come to a decision point. However, the series of events that have led us here, people are feeling like decisions need to be made quicker. And so that's why we are in the position that we are right now.
Thank you. So this, I think, might have been kind of in reference to a previous question and response, but it is why are they being like that because they don't like the SRO program or because they don't like the police department? So I think that was just a more kind of general statement about, I believe it's the WSA demand to remove the school resource officer. I don't know if anyone has a comment or response. No. So here's a question. Why aren't there any BIPOC police in Winooski? I haven't seen any. I also haven't seen any BIPOC SROs. That needs to change.
Yeah, I agree. We just recently hired our first Black police officer. He's currently in his field training segment. He'll be on his own at the end of January, and it's not for lack of trying. I'll let Jessie speak to this too if she wants to. She sits in on all the hiring processes. We're actively recruiting. This last hiring process that we're still continuing right now, our top 4 people were from marginalized communities. And it's really tough to get people through the entire process of the physical fitness exam, the entrance exam, the background check, the polygraph test, and then generating interest in this field of work right now. It's policing, rightfully so, has been under the microscope, surely the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, and a lot of changes coming. And I really give a lot of credit to young people who, get all that information through social media and the internet and still want to take on this profession. I truly believe this is a profession of people that want to help people, and there will always be people to answer that call. I'm not saying that we don't have a few bad ones there, you know, that get through the ranks, and or whether it's the job. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but obviously there's no shortage of high profile incidents where the police have made bad decisions, or have been racist, or should not have been in that profession. And I totally own that. And every time one of those incidents come up, I take it personally, because, you know, I take my oath very seriously to protect and serve the people of Winooski and Vermont. And every time somebody, you know, damages our credibility, we all pay the price for that. So in answer to your question, we are trying desperately to diversify the police department, and we know it'll make our team stronger. It's slow. You know, the average hiring process is 14 months start to finish to get a police officer through all the stages, through the academy, their field training, and then on the road. And there's a lot of hurdles that they have to cross from their initial application until that day actually happens. So we are actively trying.
And I would just add to that Eliza, I agree with you. It needs to change, and it not only needs to change in our police department, it needs to change in our staff citywide. And it is a priority for us. We need to do better, and we will continue to try to do better in hiring leaders and staff that represent our full community. It will make us, as the chief says, it will make us stronger.
Ditto for WSD.
Thank you. So we just have about 10 minutes left for the presentation and Q&A session here. I have a comment from Kiara Mack, and excuse me if I mispronounced your name, Kiara. She says, I feel that even if someone has an issue, we need to face and fix it, not run. And we need to educate on both sides, not just push the problem onto the next generation. And here is a question from Liz Edsel. It's a question for Chief Hebert. Do you have use of force and arrest data available for the Winooski Police Department by race? How concerned are you by the recent report of increased force in our neighboring city of Burlington, as reported by the VT Digger? And there's a link as well.
So I'll start the conversation by saying the Burlington Police Department has the luxury of having, at least they did, I don't know if they still do, but they had 2 people that do nothing but crime analysis on their calls for service. Vermont Digger did ask, I think it was about, I want to say 6 or 8 weeks ago, they requested the same data from us for, I think it was a 3-year period of time. And we provided that to them. I haven't heard back from the reporter that requested the information, so I have no idea. Am I concerned about Burlington's use of force? Of course. They're a neighboring police department, you know, who polices the same people we do. You know, there's people that visit Burlington and live in Winooski and vice versa. I don't know enough about it to give you an informed decision of, you know, like what they need to. I'm not going to sit here and say this is what the Burlington Police Department needs to do to fix, you know, their problem. Obviously, the numbers don't lie. You have to understand what's going on and why the numbers say what they say. And I'm sure they're doing that work. I know interim Chief Murad pretty well over the past few years, and I know he takes this very seriously. I don't know what the answer is for Burlington. You know, I try to be a good, you know, a good peer and listen and give advice when we have our chiefs meetings. But realistically, you know, I'm in charge of the Winooski Police Department. Do I keep my eye out and try and understand what's happening in our neighboring communities? Absolutely, all the time. I don't have a better answer for you as far as what's going on in Burlington.
Thank you. So here are 2 kind of related, a comment and a question. So I'll start with a comment because it leads to the question. So just to add, Winooski and Burlington basically make up all of Vermont's diversity. It shouldn't have taken you this long to hire one BIPOC police officer. And then the question is, are there action steps set in order to achieve the goal of more BIPOC folks? And I don't know, it doesn't say officers, so I'm wondering if that's, across the district and the city staff.
Yeah, I'll start, from the school perspective. It was one of the demands that was adopted by the board. So once we get ourselves organized with a steering committee and demand-based teams, that will be one of the teams that will be working on the strategy of recruiting and maintaining staff of color. So we're still in the early planning phases, and it's something that we really want to work on. And that, yes, you are right. We have not done enough over time to recruit BIPOC folks, and we want to make that better.
Thanks, Sean. Oh, sorry, Jessie, I didn't mean to interrupt. There's just a, I believe they're called anonymous attendees, so I can't tell who's, but I believe this person is clarifying that they meant across the district. But Jessie, feel free if you feel like you'd like to share some information as well.
Well, I'll just give a few bullet points on our strategy for trying to bring in more BIPOC folks into our team, both in the police department and generally. Specifically in the police department, well, generally, we recently went through a process of rewriting all of our job descriptions to be more inclusive, including equivalency for experience and education. So we're not privileging one over the other. We're looking for all experience and education both make us stronger. We have, I will say, the public safety camp that Officer Ziter talked about. That is one of our attempts to get more young people interested in municipal government generally and public service, in the hopes of making future hires from our community. We think that would make us stronger. We have started doing targeted advertisement and recruitment, really reaching out and doing individual asks when we have open positions across the city. And then we've also, the chief and I have spent some time in the mayor advocating for changes, specifically on the police department side. As the chief just mentioned, it's a very extensive process dictated by the state, advocating for some legislative change that would change that onboarding process to be more inclusive, to be more culturally appropriate, and also limit the requirements for an overnight police academy. We have heard anecdotally from people across the age spectrum, across the gender spectrum, that giving up 14 weeks of one's life to live somewhere else is not conducive to supporting families and other things that many of our neighbors have to do. So we are advocating for legislative change to make the whole process more inclusive as well. So those are just some highlights. Thanks, Emily, for letting me chime in with those.
Thanks, Jessie. And then there's a question here related to for Sean's response. How many BIPOC does the school have in any position?
So we have 3 licensed teachers who of color, and then we have about 12 support staff members, which comes out roughly to about 6 or 7% of our overall staff.
Thank you. So just 5 more minutes left to go. I don't have any more questions, just a couple of comments. And I don't know if folks just would like to, would you like me to read them out loud, or folks can read them themselves? So if there aren't any questions, I'll go ahead and read it. So making big decisions like this that impacts the whole community needs to be carefully done. This should not be a quick fix. Why would we make impulsive decisions that could potentially have a negative impact on all people? Safety needs to be our top priority. And then let's see. So this is not so much of a question, just a quote. I'm not going to be able to pronounce this on the spot. Legiomo Luz, sorry for that. So you want to talk about race that feels relevant. So the quote is, "What has happened to you is valid and true, but it's not what has happened to everyone. The experience of white communities with police are real, and the experiences of communities of color with police are real, but they are far from the same. And while it's important to recognize these different viewpoints, we must remember this. If you do trust and value your police force, and you also believe in justice and equality for people of color, you will not see the lack of trust on behalf of communities of color, as simply a difference of opinion. You will instead expect your police force to earn the respect and trust of communities of color by providing them with the same level of service that you enjoy." And then I believe there's a response here to the previous statement saying that the process is anything but impulsive, which just goes to prove the point that there are various perspectives, certainly.
Emily, can I respond to that?
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
lovely quote, and I'm thank you. It's an anonymous attendee, but I really appreciate whoever shared that. And I on behalf of the city, I do want to say, again, we really appreciate being invited into this conversation, and we'll look forward to more conversations over the weeks and months to come. This is a decision our community is going to make, and a decision that we as your experts will implement. It's not the end of a conversation. We truly believe, and I think the chief mentioned this earlier, we always need to learn and do better, regardless of what decision is made about this particular position. We all across city, and Sean, I'll speak for you for just a sec. We always want to earn your trust. We should be working to do that every day across city service. We work for the residents of Winooski, and we will continue to do that, and hope we can do that better in some people's experience. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Jessie. And then Sean, just one quick question before we close the meeting. So will the questionnaire that was sent out previously be analyzed by race? That feels important since this is a racialized issue.
We did not ask for race in the questionnaire.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see this one. Do we have an infinity group? I believe it's I believe it's an affinity group for staff across the city for the BIPOC community. And an affinity group would mean, if you'd like to clarify, but I believe that means just a group that's just specifically for BIPOC folks who work in the city. Whoever asked the question, if you'd like to clarify. But
so
go ahead, sorry, Jessica.
City question. So structurally, that is not something that we have created, an affinity group for our employees, our BIPOC employees. I don't know if they have self-created. It's an interesting idea.
I know that there has been at least a few opportunities during professional learning time at the school district where there's been opportunities for BIPOC affinity groups to meet. And that began this year. I think they've only met a few times, but there has been at least the beginning of an opportunity for that.
Okay, and so we are at 7:30. Just one final statement. We need financial support for these types of groups.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And yes, the final question here, can people still respond to the questionnaire? Yes, it's on our website, and I will copy the link here. Let me just grab it. I'll copy it into the chat. And the questionnaire is still open. And did you have a plan, a timeline to close it, Sean?
No, I mean, we want to keep it open because we just have not gotten the response that we hope for yet. Like I said, I think we're close to 50 now, but we would hope for a much bigger cross section. We do have it broken out by student, staff, parent, community member. So those are the only kind of delineating descriptors that we have in there. But please share it with people across the city and encourage people to respond. And there's places there to type in responses. It's very open-ended, and we'll be taking all of that, all those responses and finding the themes in them and sharing them out over the course of this process and with the board.
Yeah, and there's a question here about the questionnaire being shared with the community. It has. We actually have like I would say a split, I believe, between community response and staff and parent response. And there is a thoughtful plan in place to get student input as well, working through advisories. But I believe the middle high school principals felt that the students needed some additional kind of framing and support and to answering the questionnaire. So that is planned for when we get back, when school opens again after the holiday. And that is it. Those are all the questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Emily, for moderating tonight. Thank you, Jesse, Jason, and Rick for coming on behalf of the city and the police department. We really appreciate it. And thanks to our 20 attendees for coming out tonight, asking great questions and continuing to be engaged in the process. I know that it can be frustrating to not be able to have the face-to-face dialogue back and forth. And I promise you that we will get there, and there will be opportunities for all voices to be heard and faces to be seen, and discussions not just with us, but with each other and across the community, because that's what's most important, is to have Winooski residents, voters, taxpayers talking to each other about these important issues and letting their elected officials know how they feel about them. So thank you for participating.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Good night.